So then, we are back with more understandings from the time of the second tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage. So then, we can understand the time of the end. As per Yeshayahu the prophet, we find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Mashiach laid waste for many centuries. As we read it in Yeshayahu the prophet, regarding then the time of the restoration period, and this restoration is obviously related with the section of Yeshayahu, the 61st chapter. So then, there are some steps of formation regarding then the new system of China, or the BRICS system. As it was then explained before, China had paid a visit to Canada on last Thursday, and they closed up 56 partnerships regarding then the economy. And Canada obviously wants to do direct trade with China. And not only this, but the point of the whole situation is synchronizing when the system of China becomes then worldwide, and also our military being involved with the clashing of the Chinese system and the Soviet military. China has conducted maneuvers at the South Side China Sea, and because of the proximity with Japan, the Japanese Air Force was scrambled. At least is what the news are explaining. So China, they want the end of the Syrian war, and this truly makes sense because China wants to restore the Silk Road, a very important ancient route or routes through the lands that you can identify as sections of Syria, Libya, northern Egypt. So those very old ancient routes, China wants to restore it. So it's very obvious that this war in Syria has gone so far, and China wants obviously restructuring of the system of the northern section, so then they can start doing even more trade. As far as the synchronism of the new trade of China directly via internet, you find then very interesting facts regarding transitions. You find then an overwhelming amount of information. For instance, in Pearl Harbor, the radio waves were repleted with fake information. Then you find in 2008, then the house crisis also had lots of information out there regarding then banking, and then thousands upon thousands of fraud going on. So this new system has then the same line as these previous events. So from the Holy Instructions, when we begin our quest understanding the system of China, so then we can link the Apocalypse, or then Galah, understand the Galah, the revealing comes from the divine, and is extremely important understanding these sections of timing. So the timing of the system must coincide with the time of the economical problems of our country. So then, the starting point of the system is obviously related with a retrieval of certain areas of the world, and this retrieval is linked with the economical problems of the country. So when you understand then the analysis of the whole situation, we can't simply merely understand a topic without a consequence. So then, this prior of the launching of the system, we're going to find the economical trouble of the country increasing, and then a purposely retrieval of certain areas of the world, and then you find shortly after the launching of the system, so then it overwhelms even further the situation. This forces countries to sit and talk, and then obviously receiving the Chinese system as a means of bailout. So we must consider these factors, because China already has made deals with Canada, China has made deals with Africa, and also with the South American and the BRICS countries. You find then India purchasing 36 jets from France. You find then the Soviets in the top technology ever. So the situation is, quote unquote, orchestrating itself, and then the outcome of these is obviously the launching of this new system. Obviously lots of equipment in the space disguised as agriculture or television, though they can use this equipment in the space for these reasons, but the situation is it's prepared for the signal. And that's what we should be very watchful, because not only this, after the visit in Canada, then the premier went to Havana. So you find then this scrambling of the Japanese Air Force. You find more than 40 Chinese bombers exercising and maneuvering, besides tanks and also jets. Jet fighters from the Soviet Union, modern fighters. So when I begin making an analysis of this situation, you find that these events are lining up themselves for a very huge, big, overwhelming period. So then, prior of the bombing of Pearl, you find very interesting information regarding then sections of the radio frequency, and so much information being aired out, and then people were listening, but they did not understand how to make sense out of it. That's the time that we are involved with. China has sent very many equipment in space, and at the first glance, when they come up with a report, they say, obviously, oh, it's for agriculture. It's simply for mining, or television, or cable. These equipment, they can have this ability, but then the situation is the signal coverage of the Pacific. You find then, interestingly, in the Panama Canal lining up with Dragon Mart, and then you find then the South China Sea being disputed. Then you find India purchasing jets. So we must be very cautious where we park our ships, where we park our submarines, and put some ears out there, so then we can start evaluating what the submarine warfare of China is dealing with, because the obvious situation is the Navy of China being linked up with the Soviet Navy, and since they have very important stealth underwater abilities and capabilities, it wouldn't take much for us to understand that these technology is going to be given over to the Chinese, and we might be late in understanding this point. So then, the overwhelming part of it is Cancun in Mexico. So as far as the lining up of this trade system of China, it is absolutely imperative prior to the launching, organizing Cancun, Mexico, the largest market in the world, Dragon Mart. It already exists in China and then Dubai and Arabia. That's why the Arabs lower down the price of crude. So then China can make usage of this crude. And then because of quantity, then the Arabs, they can get their money via quantity rather than pricing. So then an analysis of the system is giving you very important indications when Dragon Mart is ready and starting its duty. You find items there up to 5 times cheaper purchased in Cancun, Mexico than in the United States. It doesn't have to go very far to understand what's going to be of our economy after the completion of Dragon Mart. And then the categories of ships are changing because post-Panamax obviously can fit through the new canal. So you find an overwhelming amount of information as it was during the time of Pearl. So the analysis is exactly the same. It's overwhelming amount of information, and then gathering this information, not knowing what to do with it until it's late. So Daniel the prophet gives us a few clues so then we can identify. It's not interpreting. That's the distinction from identifying and interpreting. Interpreting disregards structuring. However, identification considers the structuring of the scripture based from the prophets until the time of restoration, and then later on the final combat known as Yom Kippur. So then people who were used to go to church and never had a glimpse of understanding Revelation from the original manuscripts, it is truly amazing the amount of alignment to these events describes themselves. So Daniel 11 is then the reflective portion of events that already have taken place. So you have the prophecies themselves, and you have then the reflections of these. For instance, if you read the kingdom of the east, when Daniel first spoke of the prophecy, it was then a certain kingdom in the past. But then when you try to understand Revelation, you find the same kingdom of the east in another geographical area. So there is a reflection from the previous and then later in the Apocalypse. So from this viewpoint, we understand the kingdom of the east of this restoration period is China, because the most powerful nation trade-wise at this point in time. So then, because of the link that exists from the Hebrew word netzer regarding then the coming of the Hamashiach ben Yosef, but then when he uses on a Gentile level, and that's what Daniel was, 90% plus of his prophecies is related with the Gentile kingdom. Then when they use the word netzer, is related with a system. And then you find on the reflection portion of these systems, you find then the socialists that were very popular during the 60s. You find that this precise same system is then returning, but not in a point of military taking over, but rather trade-wise taking over. And as a result of trade, then the Soviet military then goes on service. And this service simply means military service either underwater or above ground or in the air. So there are steps of formation that must be considered, and these must be yet identified. So then, as the events they take place, you find then trade and then military development. Never reversed. We are in a situation where then we have lots of military technology, but we are failing trade. It doesn't go very far. So there is a limitation of the ruining of the economy, though the technology in the military is great. But the situation is, China is also very advanced, though they copy a lot of material. And then joining up with the Soviets, they have a technology of their own. And then you combine both of these nations, trade and an advanced military. And then in Daniel 11 explained, then later on, the kingdom of the north coming with much equipment. So, gives you few clues of what is coming in the future, if you wish to understand the apocalypse or revelation. If you think that God is big enough that it's going to do whatever you want, although you have no knowledge of the scripture, then if by osmosis you think you are a temple of sorts, and then the spirit living in you of sorts is going to give you every answer you can think of, then you are mistaken. Because the divine has said very precisely, teach your children diligently. So it doesn't come by osmosis. It comes by studying it. Because the natural form of human beings is to stay away from the real truth of the original manuscripts. That's the natural works of the flesh. And you can be sure of it, the Greco-Roman translation does not give you proximity if you don't study. So then, the news are available. You can identify these areas as you read Daniel 11 and also Galah, known as Revelation. So please stay tuned. Much more coming up.